This is the multi-voice text-to-speech podfic reading of Holy Water from My Own Veins by Crabapple, composed by Burning Aurora, Kaliana, and Flowerhawk. Remus Lupin felt that he had been wrong about the nature of life from his very start. Life began with lovely parents, in love with each other and enamored with their son. He nicked biscuits from the cupboard, was allowed a tip of coffee from his father's mug in his morning milk, and received long, involved, made-up stories from his mother at bedtime. He learned to read at 4, when he suddenly announced the contents of the Cardiff newspaper to his parents at the breakfast table, reading the front page aloud while his mother fried eggs. As was fitting, he was plied with books and watched closely when his dad used his wand around the house, muttering what sounded strange but inherently magical words that sometimes produced light or sparks or levitated objects. None of this seemed at all strange to him. It was simply how it was. Until it wasn't. Until he woke up to what he thought was a dog in the middle of his room and pain in his leg. His father's wand again, this time with angry words. Later, the smell of bleach and antiseptic, and his mother slapping the Medi-Wizard, who he had heard say it might be best if he never woke up. Then there were leashes and ties and later chains, once a month. His father's tight expression and his mother's worry, and school at home instead of in whatever village they were in for the next few months, until the questions got to be too much, or his parents' fear got to be too much, and they moved again. He learned to fear the moon, and that life was never meant to be fair. Therefore, life took him by immense surprise at least a few times. Once, when at 11, he was allowed to go to Hogwarts, after a visit to his parents by Albus Dumbledore himself. Hogwarts was a miracle of surprises. The entire castle was one surprise after another, from the boats they used to get to it, to the Great Hall, to the sorting hat that announced Gryffindor almost the moment it landed on his head. He didn't realize it until much, much later, but of course he valued bravery, because he had had to be brave for almost his entire life before that. It was the other side of being afraid and of being different. Remus was also surprised by other things in the castle, mainly by his dorm mates, who first began with polite conversation, James Potter, sullen fear Remus recognized, Sirius Black, and ordinary 11-year-old generosity, Peter Pettigrew. He was not surprised when James and Sirius became inseparable, but he was surprised when they allowed him and Peter to tag along. He was more surprised when soon James and Sirius didn't just allow them to come, but sought them out. By the end of first year, when they were a solid group of friends, the first real friends Remus had ever had, he found himself waiting for the inevitable end. He thought the end had come one night, the evening after the full moon, in the winter of his second year, when he went back to the dormitory from the hospital wing to find Sirius biting his lip, James scuffing his shoe on the floor, and Peter pulling at his hands. When James asked, "Are you a werewolf?" Remus looked at the floor and knew that the end had found him again. He didn't think Dumbledore would cast him out, but he thought they might, and wondered if he would need to kip on the common room couch for the next few years. He didn't say yes, but he did blink back tears, until he heard the voice of Sirius Black say,
"It doesn't matter to us, you know."
And he looked up to an earnest James and nervous Peter and a calm, slightly haughty Sirius. Sirius's look challenged him to argue, but Remus didn't, once again trying to calmly accept that life had surprised him at the same time he distrusted its goodness. If he'd known what the inevitable end would be, he reflected later, he might have been better off not only sleeping on a Gryffindor couch, but begging Dumbledore to send him home. Because instead, again, for just a little while, he got immediate, immeasurable happiness. There were parties and silly fights, and 3 anime guy at 15 years old that put a lump in his throat and a spring in his step. From the time they were 16, there was Sirius Black, impossibly beautiful and indefinitely mercurial, kissing him, hands all over him, fucking him, in Hogwarts nooks, in their flat in London, in quick, furtive spouts of affection when changing over order assignments or on routine rota patrols. There was boundless love and tender devotion, all until, of course, there wasn't. Until Sirius got quiet in their flat, until he looked first to James before he ever said anything to Remus, until even his kisses went from tender, if hurried, to bruising and somehow sharp. Remus wished he was surprised, and found he wasn't, no matter how much it hurt. The last time, one time in mid-October, Sirius was slow and careful. His kisses were tender and his hands didn't bruise, though he held on more tightly than Remus would have thought possible. When Remus dozed off after, he woke to fresh tea and charmed warm fried eggs, and the novel Remus had been reading moved from the nightstand to the kitchen table, but no Sirius Black. When Remus returned from his mission on November 2nd, the day before Sirius's birthday, there was no one, and Remus wasn't sure he had ever known Sirius Black at all. He watched James and Lily be buried, and he held Mrs. Pettigrew's hand at Peter's memorial. He was the only silent witness to the utter impossibility of what happened when happiness went horribly wrong. It wasn't his first time. It took him longer to figure out what was going on than it should have. To be fair to himself, he would reason. He was A, man, and B, his world had fallen apart slowly and then suddenly, inexorably, just a couple of months prior. Still, as he sat in the magical library near Oxford for almost an entire day in late January, he felt flushed from inner shame and something close to regret. He read words like, "more common in magical creatures."
Read not creatures.
He thought. Bodies already changed due to magical means, used to further the race of magical creatures, especially when other forms of change are violent in nature. He read words like, normal duration of a human pregnancy, an offspring not always born with the parent's affliction, and more common than is thought in the magical community and body will adjust. And then read, just accordingly to conform with typical sexual presentation. He even read that both male and female werewolves were well used to carrying throughout a human pregnancy. He had seen this with females in the packs. He had not thought it, of course, for himself. Any text that held the phrase "life will find a way" was slammed shut immediately. He considered his options, of course. There were herbs and potions. He thought of trying to support someone else, much less himself. His small inheritance, the largest asset of which was his parents' cottage in Wales, would hardly last through the summer, even if he stretched it. He couldn't find work, and when he did, he had trouble keeping it through more than a couple of phases of the moon. He thought of Sirius. He couldn't help that, of the extreme cruelty that he thought Sirius had learned to contain, and that he must not have. But he also thought of Sirius at 16, 18, 20, of his perfect mouth and his brilliant mind, and found that he still couldn't say no when it came to anything involving Sirius Black. So he packed up the flat that he couldn't afford without Sirius anyway, the one with the eviction notice taped to the door, and he drove his mother's old car to the cottage in Wales. He spent the rest of the winter setting it up, a fire in the grate and charms on the windows. He warded it carefully, meticulously. He didn't need unwanted visitors or attention. In the spring, he painted the second of the 3 bedrooms a soft green color. He cast glamours on himself and found a used crib in the second-hand shop in the village, some books and some toys, and a fluffy rabbit he could not resist. A rocking chair showed up on his doorstep one day, and he thought it was his next-door neighbor. He took it in without comment, but left her a freshly baked pie the next day. The next time they happened to be at the grocer's together, she shifted her arm a bit to show the wand tucked in her sleeve, and Remus smiled at her, his first real smile in months. On July 11th, 20 days shy of Harry Potter's 2nd birthday, Remus found that he could no longer ignore the now rhythmic tightening of his swollen abdomen or the pain in his back. He waited as long as he could before driving himself, slowly and surely, to the hospital in Cardiff. He entered through the magical entrance with a tap of his wand. The woman at the desk took one look at him and pulled him into a private room, asking him to strip down, put on the medical gown, and wait for the Mediwitch. A tall woman with blonde hair and a bun and a white coat came in alongside a nurse. She chided him thoroughly when his answer to what prenatal care he had was none. But she palpitated his belly as it tightened in and out of a contraction, and declared it seemed like the baby was in the right position for delivery. She cast diagnostic spells with her wand, indicating amniotic fluid was good, the infant's heartbeat was strong and steady, and that while Remus had certainly labored quite a bit at home, his blood pressure and vitals were also looking good. His body had adjusted accordingly, and there was a clear canal for birth.
"You have been incredibly lucky so far, Mr. Lupin,"
she said. Remus wasn't so sure that was true, but he was grateful when the nurse attending her held his hand through the next contraction.
"Who should we call for you?"
the nurse asked. Remus shook his head, struggled to keep his breathing going, for more than one reason.
No one. There's no one.
Both the Mediwitch and the nurse looked ready to argue, but the nurse squeezed his hand again and put a cool cloth to his forehead. Remus was grateful. The Mediwitch looked to the nurse, who nodded.
I'll be in to check on you periodically. Nurse Bauer will look after you as she is able between patients. When you feel the need to bear down or push, if neither of us is here, press the button by the bed.
Remus nodded and put a hand on his belly, gritting his teeth through a contraction.
Your contractions are quite close together. I don't think you have long.
She said not unkindly before sweeping out of the room. The nurse re-wet the cloth and brushed the sweaty fringe off of Remus's forehead.
We see more men than you think.
She said matter-of-factly.
More common than is thought.
Remus replied, panting. She smiled.
About 1 in 8,000 births in the magical world. About the same rate as triplets.
At Remus's face she laughed just a little.
You only have the one, I promise.
She said. Remus breathed through another contraction, and she squeezed his hand a little tighter. He was suddenly so thankful for her kindness, he began to cry.
Oh dear.
She said, wiping the tears with the washcloth.
I can tell you are a strong one. You will be fine, as will this little one.
Remus, from long experience, didn't believe her, but he leaned back on the pillow and blinked tears up toward the ceiling. 2 hours later, never leaving his side, though the Medi-Witch had said there were other patients, the nurse summoned the Medi-Witch back. The nurse had coaxed Remus onto his knees, and he found the position helpful to relieve the pain in his back. He felt the urge to bear down come with his contractions, and the nurse had told him to let gravity help him. Remus felt beyond help, but he did what he could, chased the instinct push. He gasped for a moment as he felt fire and then paused to draw breath. The Medi-Witch looked up at him.
That'd be the head.
She said gently.
Slow down and gently push, and the shoulders will come next.
Remus, as he nearly always did as he was bid, and he gasped again at the sensation of new life sliding from his body. The nurse squeezed his hand, and it felt like an eternity trapped in a moment before a sharp cry rang the air. Remus collapsed back, and the nurse leaned forward. She turned back to him with a smile shot through with light.
It's a girl.
She said.
You have a daughter?
In spite of the hours, the months before, Remus stared at her in disbelief, as if it couldn't be true.
You'll need to deliver the placenta, but the Medi-Witch is performing diagnostics right now, and your little one seems perfect.
She smiled again.
Do you have a name picked out?
At that, Remus managed to find his voice.
My mother's name was Hope.
How wonderful.
The nurse said.
Hope.
She reached forward and took a bundle from the Medi-Witch, carefully placing it in Remus's still shaking arms. Remus looked down at a small red face crowned with a shock of black hair.
Hope?
He repeated, and for the first time in perhaps forever, he felt the feeling along with the name. Even knowing the unfair nature of life, Remus did his best to make sure Hope felt as little of it as possible. His love was infinite, a deep well of affection he made sure to demonstrate daily. His bank account might not have been, but after the first few rough months of having a newborn, he found fairly steady employment tutoring children of all ages in the village. Hope never had the finest things, the newest toys or clothes that didn't come from the second-hand shop, but she never wanted for food or shelter or attention. If the rumor around the village was that Remus Lupin spoiled his daughter, Remus found he was fine with that, particularly because Hope's nature seemed to him, and quite possibly everyone else she encountered, as deeply and irrevocably good. Any temper she showed was fierce but quickly over, and if it reminded Remus of someone else he never said. She never complained when things were lean, and she never asked for more than Remus could offer. What Remus could offer, his love and his attention and a deep, abiding sense of security, seemed enough to satisfy her. She was bright and brilliant, inquisitive and curious, and from a young age felt justice strongly and innately, which Remus realized when she came home crying from nursery that her friend Megan had been accused of hitting a boy, and that it had been witnessed by Hope to be another child, but Megan had been punished anyway. He wiped her tears and soothed her, though he knew that she, too, already knew the world was unfair, and it already at 4 years old broke his heart. Remus kept her in the Muggle world as much as he could, but magic was always close by. For one, he had to use the services of his neighbor, Mrs. Fields, for babysitting once a month. Mrs. Fields took the girl from an infant on, with no comment, and with games and books for Hope and tea and bandages for Remus in the morning. She made his life infinitely bearable through her thoughtfulness and the withholding of any judgment, and Hope made sure to paint her pictures and give her hugs and visit her for piano lessons, which she proved incredibly gifted with. When at 3, Hope floated a book off the bookshelf in her room that she wanted to read at bedtime that night, Remus knew there would never be keeping magic from her. He carefully explained magic, drawing his wand and performing a few simple spells. Hope had watched with awe etched on her face, and it took Remus's breath away. She never once, during any moon, turned into a werewolf, and Remus was so thankful he could have cried, and did. Which is why, 2 days after Hope's 11th birthday, Remus should not have been surprised when Albus Dumbledore rang his doorbell. But he was. He had let the years spool out, and he had secretly hoped they would continue to do so. Trust Albus Dumbledore to have different plans. They had tea in the back garden as Remus waited for Hope to come home from her piano lesson. Eventually, Dumbledore set his teacup on the grass beside Remus's second rickety lawn chair.
She needs a magical education, Remus,
He said, not unkindly, but Remus noted the hint of steel.
I can provide her what she will need at home.
Remus replied. The answer came easily. It was what he had been planning, what he had known he would need to do all along. Dumbledore took a breath.
I have no doubts as to your competence as a teacher,
He began.
but you would deny the girl the experience of Hogwarts.
Remus took a breath like he had been punched in the gut, which in many ways he had been.
She has plenty of friends and is well socialized. I see no reason to send her away.
Dumbledore hummed at that.
You can't deny her her birthright.
He said. Remus's head whirled to look at him.
Which one?
It was on the tip of his tongue to ask if it was the black birthright, or the werewolf one, or some other incarnation he hadn't thought of yet.
The magical one.
Dumbledore said calmly.
It seems she is already a gifted witch, and will become even more so under the right tutelage.
Remus's eyes narrowed.
How long have you been keeping tabs on us?
My boy, I never stopped.
Dumbledore said mildly, and Remus thought for a moment about punching him. Maybe it wasn't Sirius from whom Hope had inherited her temper. Dumbledore held up a hand.
You have done admirably with her, and under the most difficult circumstances. Remus.
Dumbledore stopped.
Remus, you must understand that she is coming to an age when you can't provide her all she needs anymore. No parent can.
Remus looked at him.
It will be clear to the staff, at least if not many of the students, what her parentage is.
Dumbledore met Remus's eyes.
The staff will be forbidden to talk about it, and I will squash any other gossip personally.
Remus sighed, ran a hand over his eyes. When Dumbledore spoke again, his voice was soft.
I am assuming, Remus, that you have not told her what her parentage is.
Remus looked over at him, eyes sharp.
That's none of your business.
Dumbledore spread his hands.
Perhaps not, but you must realize.
That I need to tell her that her other father is a mass murderer who betrayed his closest friends and led an evil dictator to their door to murder them.
Remus,
Dumbledore said. Remus looked off at the rolling grass of the back garden.
She knows she has another father, that he is away and can't be with us.
that's all you've told her.
Dumbledore said flatly.
That's all she needs to know.
Remus said.
My dear boy, you must know the older she gets, the more curious she will be. You can't keep this from her forever.
Remus sighed.
I'm quite sure my parenting is none of your business.
He said. Dumbledore looked at him.
Perhaps not, but she is.
Remus looked at him sharply.
She is already a gifted witch.
He repeated.
She needs what Hogwarts will provide.
Remus looked at the grass again.
I won't give her up.
He said.
Remus,
Dumbledore said softly.
I am not asking that of you at all. I am asking for you to let her grow up.
Remus thought, looking out at the grass, of his own experience at Hogwarts, of the years of the happiness he had known then, of the years of bittersweet happiness he had managed to carve out for himself and for Hope since. He knew in his heart he had already lost this argument. Dumbledore was, as was his annoying wont, right, in more ways than one. He could no more deny Hope a Hogwarts education than his parents could have denied him, but the thought of her being exposed to the casual cruelty of others made his heart beat faster. He sighed. The back door slammed open and closed suddenly, and Hope was stalking across the grass toward them, strands of black hair coming loose from her braid. She had a smile on her face that faltered as she saw Dumbledore. She came to a stop just a few feet from Remus and Dumbledore.
You're Albus Dumbledore.
Hope's voice was high with surprise.
I have a chocolate frog card with you on it.
Remus and Dumbledore exchanged a look.
That's quite right, Miss Lupin.
Dumbledore said.
You look younger in person.
Hope said.
Hope?
Remus chided, but Dumbledore laughed.
A compliment I will take any day of the week.
Dumbledore said. He looked significantly at Remus before reaching into his robe, taking out a large envelope. Remus eyed it, but let him hand it to Hope, and watched her eyes widen as she held it almost reverently in her hands.
This is my Hogwarts letter.
Remus's eyes pricked suddenly at the joy evident in Hope's voice.
Indeed, my dear.
Dumbledore said. Hope looked over at her father.
I got a Hogwarts letter. You're going to let me go.
Her voice was soft, and Remus's own heart broke off one more little piece.
Yes, love.
Remus said.
You're going to go to Hogwarts.
Hope's face beamed so brightly that Remus could hardly believe he had argued in favor of anything that would have prevented that blinding light. Just a couple of weeks later, at the end of July, the world came crashing down again, and Remus was once again reminded that he should no longer be surprised. Once again, Dumbledore did not announce himself. He merely knocked on the back door and then made himself at home at Remus's kitchen table, a copy of the Daily Prophet spread in front of him. All Remus could see was Sirius's deranged laughing mugshot and headlines blaring of his escape. His heart, which had never stopped aching in 12 years, was now a sharp, heavy thing in his chest.
This rather complicates things,
He said to Dumbledore, not even bothering with making tea. Hope was next door at a piano lesson.
Not necessarily.
Dumbledore said, and Remus snorted.
There will be protective measures in place around Hogwarts.
Dumbledore said.
such as...
Dementors, though they will not be allowed on the school grounds.
Remus stared, mouth open. Dumbledore sighed.
The Ministry is insistent, and I can only deny them so much.
They think he's headed toward Hogwarts.
Remus asked. He paused.
They think he's headed to Harry.
Harry, whom Remus only remembered as a tiny boy. He swallowed hard.
He was overheard saying that he is at Hogwarts.
Remus sighed heavily.
The staff has been informed of the danger, and they are on alert.
Dumbledore said.
And while I don't want to make assumptions, I do assume that Sirius Black knows nothing.
He stopped.
Of Hope.
Remus managed to keep the tremor out of his voice.
No, I didn't know until after.
He shook his head. Dumbledore did not need to know the details.
Hope will be in no more danger than the average student.
Dumbledore said. Remus laughed bitterly.
That is patently untrue, and you know it.
Dumbledore was silent for a moment.
I have a proposal.
Remus looked at him.
As you know, the defense position is cursed, and I have not been able to keep anyone in the post for more than a year, so I cannot promise you more than that, but I can offer you the position for this school year.
Remus stared speechless.
You are more than qualified, with your tutoring experience, and your outstanding work in the subject both in school and out of it.
You're offering me the position of Defense Against the Dark Arts Professor.
Remus asked. Dumbledore nodded.
You would be able to remain close to Hope, and well, it might offer both of you more protection.
Are you afraid I'm helping him?
Remus asked suddenly. Dumbledore's face softened.
I highly doubt you would risk your daughter, and I know I am right about that.
Remus nodded.
Hope the stuff.
Are to remain silent on the issue, as I have said.
He paused.
There is the matter of Wolfsbane as well.
Remus looked at him.
Wolfsbane is expensive and not widely available.
He said slowly.
Snape is able to brew it. I could make a condition of your employment, as it were. You would have access.
Remus sighed. Sirius's face laughed up at him, deranged from the photo on the table. Even then, he saw the same black hair, the same cheekbones instead of the chin that he saw reflected at him every day.
I accept.
He said. Dumbledore nodded, as if the answer was ever going to be anything else. August 31st saw Remus and Hope installed in a room at the Leaky Cauldron, from where they would take the train from King's Cross in the morning. Remus was attempting to settle Hope in for the night, but she was still chattering away to him in excitement as he perched on the side of her bed.
And I saw Harry Potter here.
Remus smiled.
He's a couple of years older than I am, but he seemed nice. I can't believe I have my own wand.
11 inches birch unicorn heartstring. Excellent for transfiguration.
Remus repeated. He'd been next to her at Ollivander's that very morning, watched as the wand vibrated to life in her hand, shooting golden sparks and accidentally already transfiguring a quill of Ollivanders into a purple marble.
Hope, love.
Remus started, running a hand over her head, even though she had begun protesting the motion by the time she was 10. This time she didn't. Let him stroke her scalp and down her hair, touching her cheek briefly.
I know. I need to try to settle down, sleep.
She said.
Yes, my girl, of course, but
Remus said. He sighed.
I think we might need to have a difficult conversation first. And I am sorry. I should have had it much, much sooner with you, but I was afraid.
Hope suddenly took a breath and stilled.
You sound like you do when you talk about the werewolf.
She said. Remus was taken aback a bit by the comparison.
I suppose I might.
He started.
This is a part of, well, myself, that I don't like to think about much anymore, especially not with you.
I won't tell anyone you're a werewolf.
Hope said quietly.
I know, love, that's not what this is about.
Remus sighed.
You're going to hear things at school, and they are most likely going to be true, and you need to hear the truth from me first.
Hope's eyes were wide and serious, large in her face.
This is about your other parent, your other fathers.
Remus started.
I know that's unusual.
Hope started, as if she knew in the least where this was headed. Remus's mouth quirked a little,
Yes, but apparently less unusual than you might think.
distance giving away to a bit of wryness. Remus blew out a breath.
I met your father at school. We were classmates at Hogwarts, part of a group of friends. After school, we joined the Order of the Phoenix, an organization that was put together by Dumbledore to fight Voldemort. We had been together since Hogwarts, shared a flat after.
Hope was still all wide eyes, and Remus swallowed against the lump in his throat.
I loved him very much. I thought he loved me. But something happened. I was doing work for the Order I couldn't tell him about, and I'm not sure when he began to not trust me anymore.
Is that why he left?
Hope's voice seemed impossibly young, and Remus blinked back tears.
Unfortunately, darling, no.
Remus blew out a breath.
He didn't really leave. Not like you might think.
I don't understand.
Remus shook his head.
He was sent to Azkaban.
Remus said bluntly. Hope looked momentarily confused.
For what?
Hope.
Remus said softly, and he saw her eyes actually fill with tears. He wanted to rip his heart right out of his body. Felt like that was what he was doing to his girl right now.
No, he's not.
She shook her head.
Your father is Sirius Black.
Remus said softly and simply.
No.
Hope said.
He wasn't always.
Remus stopped.
I don't know what happened. To this day, I don't know what happened.
He heard his voice break.
He was brilliant and so intelligent and loyal. I loved him so much, and I think for a long time, he loved me too.
Remus ran a shaky hand across Hope's cheek, wiping away tears.
He's a murderer.
Hope said loudly in the small room.
I don't know what happened.
Remus said softly.
I never would have thought. I didn't think.
He stopped.
Do you think he is now?
Again, that small, young voice. The question took Remus off guard.
There was a spy in the Order. It wasn't me. It had to have been him, I guess. I didn't. Until that Halloween, I didn't.
Remus faltered.
But I do believe what they say happened. I've had to believe it.
Why?
Again, the question caught Remus out. He thought.
Because pretty soon after, I had to believe in you. And that took all the bit of faith I had.
It was quiet for a moment, the only sound the clock ticking on the wall.
I didn't want to tell you. Not this way.
Remus said.
But at Hogwarts, people will talk. Dumbledore says he will try to prevent that. But people knew what we were to each other.
What was that?
That I loved him.
Remus said simply. Hope was silent, eyes wide.
Whenever you have questions, love, ask me. It may take some time for them to come. I know this is a surprise.
Hope nodded. Remus leaned forward and kissed her forehead.
Do try to sleep, darling. I know you're a bit old for this, but would you like a story?
Hope nodded, and Remus felt his heart contract in his chest.
Thinking of one.
Hansel and Gretel.
Hope asked. For some reason, it had been a favorite of hers since she was small. Remus nodded.
Gingerbread house.
Hope nodded back.
Gingerbread house.
Remus and Hope arrived early at King's Cross the next day. Remus was trying to avoid attention, and even though he knew it was futile, it was working so far. They took the last compartment on the train, stowing Remus's bag and Hope's school trunk. They were only 3 days out from the moon, and once the train started moving, Remus fell asleep against the glass, looking out at the city slipping away as Hope studied her new charms textbook. He woke with a start. Cold and dread settled into his stomach, his bones. He looked over at Hope, who was wide-eyed, eyes sadder than they should be, mouth open. A small commotion was happening on the floor. A bushy-haired girl and a red-haired boy standing over another boy. A boy who looked just like James. Remus's heart stuttered. He conjured flames into his hand, lighting the compartment. It did nothing to make the cold dissipate, and he could hear Sirius's voice suddenly, clearly.
But you were always gone, Mooney.
He looked around the compartment on reflex, but of course there was no Sirius, just Hope and 3 other children, all frightened. Remus's breath crystallized before him, and he knew suddenly what was happening. Remus reached into his pocket, drew out a bar of chocolate.
Here,
He said, handing some of the chocolate to the boy who must be Harry Potter.
eat this, it will help.
He broke off more pieces and handed them to the other 2 children and to Hope.
Dad,
Hope asked.
it's so cold.
Remus looked at her.
Dementors. The chocolate will help.
The children looked at him, wide-eyed. He kept the flames in his hand aglow.
I'm going to go speak to the conductor.
He had noticed the train wasn't moving.
You all stay here. I'll be back as soon as I can.
He squeezed Hope's shoulder, then, on impulse, Harry's, before sweeping out of the compartment and down the corridor of the train. He stalked up to the driver's compartment and banged the door open. The conductor jumped.
Why are there Dementors on the train?
Remus demanded. The conductor looked both helpless and furious.
They were close to the grounds and they came aboard. There was really no one to stop them.
Remus's mouth set.
There is now. Do you know where they are?
The conductor pointed to the corridor Remus had just come down.
I don't know. They could be in compartments or on the outside again.
Remus, who was done with the man, banged out of the compartment again and began searching the train. He was halfway down to a semi-empty compartment when he encountered one, and some of its comrades just outside the window. He threw his wand out and said clearly,
Expecto Patronum.
casting a bright, shining wolf who ran ahead of him, casting the Dementor on the train out and the ones on the grounds away from the train, shaking its canine head and tossing aside the creatures. Remus watched the Patronus bound ahead the length of the train, throwing the occasional Dementor before finally dissipating along with the cold. Remus went back to the conductor.
Start the train. Get us to Hogwarts.
He said, breathing heavily and not from fear. Dumbledore and Minerva McGonagall were there to meet the train, as was the usual staff who were there to herd the students. Prior to disembarking, Remus had checked on Hope and Harry again, and on who turned out to be Hermione Granger and Ron Weasley. They were all fine, and Remus had given Hope a short, and he hoped discreet, squeeze on the shoulder before he had set off again, waiting at the front of the train to step off almost before it had come to a stop.
For Godric's sake, Albus,
Remus nearly shouted.
there were Dementors on the train. With students?
Remus breathed out heavily. Dumbledore held up a hand.
And the ministry will hear my strong feelings on the subject.
He said sternly.
That's not good enough.
Remus said,
Mr. Lupin,
They were children, including my child.
you are being heard, Professor Lupin.
Dumbledore said, and use of the title brought Remus up short.
They were lucky you were aboard.
He said.
Yes, well, they shouldn't have needed to be lucky.
Remus said, smoothing out his tattered robes.
Harry Potter in particular will need some medical attention.
He added. Dumbledore looked at McGonagall, who answered.
He's already being taken to the hospital wing to be examined by Poppy Pomfrey.
She said. Remus nodded.
Good.
He breathed out sharply, tried to wrangle his temper.
Professor McGonagall, it is good to see you.
He said. McGonagall smiled a genuine smile.
Please call me Minerva. And Albus is right. They were lucky to have you and your quick thinking at hand.
Remus nodded again.
None of us is hiding Sirius Black underneath our cloaks.
He said.
Indeed.
Dumbledore said. Minerva smiled at Remus.
The opening feast is being prepared, and I must go meet the first years. I should think you might want to make sure you are in the Great Hall for the feast, Professor Lupin. You may have a vested interest in the sorting this year.
A smile peeked out from Minerva's otherwise stern exterior. An answering smile bloomed on Remus's face.
Indeed I do.
He said, and he walked up to the castle, looming before him along with his colleagues. Remus had taken his spot at the high table, just to the right of Flitwick, when McGonagall ushered in the first years. He had managed a nod at Snape and received a sneer in return, which was about as civil a greeting as he had expected. He spotted Hope in about the middle of the group of students, who had been sorted alphabetically. He tried and failed to hide his smile at the sight of her. Hope, here at Hogwarts, among the tables of other students, the candles glowing beneath the enchanted night sky, was a sight he wasn't sure he would ever have seen. Remus couldn't imagine what his life would be like without her, and this. The throng wanted patiently as student after student was called forward, the tables erupting in cheers as first years joined their houses. Suddenly, Minerva McGonagall's clear voice called out,
Lupin, Hope.
The great hall became so silent it seemed no one was even moving a muscle. But Hope strode forward, footsteps clacking on the cobblestones, chin held high as her robes swirled slightly around her, until she stepped up to the stool and sat down, gazing out at the entire school before her. Remus's heart grew so big so suddenly he thought it might burst. The hat settled on her head, and to Remus's surprise, the hat seemed to be taking a moment, muttering to her. Soon, though, it stopped, and Remus was fairly sure he heard Hope's voice quietly carried to him when she had said,
Obviously.
His smile turned into a grin as the hat announced,
Gryffindor.
The Gryffindor table burst into applause and a roar of noise as the students also stomped their feet and pounded the table. Hope hopped off the stool and walked over to the table, grinning, taking a seat next to another first year, who had also just been sorted. Only a little later did she spare a shy glance up at the high table. Remus, who had been waiting for it, sent her a small smile, one she returned before going back to talking to Lawrence Middleton, who had been sorted after her. Remus fell into a routine more or less fairly quickly. His classes kept him busy, and though Hope was always a constant presence in his mind, he tried to keep his distance. This was her Hogwarts experience, and therefore hers to manage. He found it strange, and not more than a little lonely, that having spent the last more than 11 years completely occupied with her, that he needed now to step away. He reflected, though, it was as much that she was growing up, and he needed to let her do that, in her own way and in her own time. Dumbledore had been infuriatingly right. They settled into a routine of having lunch every Tuesday and Friday in Remus's office, and she knew she was always welcome in his quarters. Still, he let her navigate her own battles, including the ongoing one she was having in potions, with Snape, who treated her much as he treated any Gryffindor, badly and with contempt. Remus kept her confidences to himself, but none of it endeared him to the man. Besides, there was another young person who needed his help as much, perhaps more, and that was, Remus noted with sadness, Harry Potter. Remus felt more than a twinge of guilt at his distance from Harry over the years, but he himself had been surviving, had had a child. Still, the jolt of recognition he always felt when he saw Harry, not just of James and of Lily, but of the little boy who used to tug Padfoot's ears, who scribbled with crayons with Remus himself, was a constant reminder of what his life had been like, and of what his and Harry's lives had turned into. So on the first Hogsmeade weekend, when Remus looked up to see Harry appear in his office, he had invited the boy inside, and he was warmed as much by the company as by the wolfsbane and the tea. Afterwards, Remus offered to walk Harry back to Gryffindor Tower, hoping to also catch a glimpse of Hope. Neither of them were prepared for what they would find. Remus put a hand on Harry's shoulder, instinctively pushing the boy behind him, as he took the stairs to the tower. Dumbledore was there, questioning the portraits, the fat lady gone, her portrait slashed. Remus heard the words,
He was here.
and
Sirius Black.
and his blood ran cold. He scanned the crowd for Hope and didn't see her.
Professor.
Remus called out, and that got Dumbledore's attention. McGonagall had appeared at Remus's side, and she looked at him grimly.
We will evacuate the tower of the first and second years.
Dumbledore said, looking at Remus as he said it.
The older students will assist, and I trust you to Professor McGonagall's care. Prefects will also assist, and will assist the professor in setting up the Great Hall, where I would like Gryffindor students to sleep for the evening. We must be cautious.
Dumbledore nodded at McGonagall and received a nod in return.
Other staff members will meet me in the office as we organize a search of the castle and grounds.
Dumbledore said. Remus opened his mouth to protest when Dumbledore said,
All staff.
Remus set his mouth but nodded, only letting out his breath when he saw Hope exit the tower along with one of the prefects. She looked confused and frightened, her brown eyes pale in her face, but she followed directions. Her eyes met Remus's briefly, and he inclined his head toward McGonagall, and Hope nodded.
Later,
He mouthed. She nodded again and continued down the stairs. Remus turned on his heel and started toward the headmaster's office. The meeting in Dumbledore's office was short and efficient. It reminded Remus of an emergency order meeting, and he did not appreciate the comparison. He lingered intentionally after the rest of the staff had left.
Professor Lupin, are your directions not clear?
Remus nodded. They were. He was to patrol the edge of the grounds, including the shack and the Forbidden Forest, to see if the creatures there had any information they were willing to share. Information both he and Dumbledore knew they were more likely to share with him.
I have
He cleared his throat.
something to tell you.
Dumbledore looked at him.
Sirius Black is an unregistered animagus.
He said flatly. Dumbledore raised his eyebrows.
And you didn't think this was pertinent information before he broke into the castle?
Remus set his jaw, then loosened it.
He, James, and Peter became animagi before we left school to help me through my transformations.
I see.
Dumbledore's tone was icy.
What is his form?
A dog.
Remus answered.
A dog who could leave claw marks on a portrait.
Dumbledore asked. Remus tilted his mouth and looked at the man.
And Potter and Pettigrew.
Remus did not see the relevance, but he answered.
James a stag, Peter a rat.
Dumbledore looked right back.
Why tell me now?
Because if he even comes close to hurting a hair on my child's head, I will kill him myself.
Remus said. Dumbledore looked pensive for a moment. Then he looked Remus up and down.
Duly noted.
Remus nodded and then set out on his ordered patrol. Most of the students were asleep in the Great Hall when Remus entered it. It was fairly full. Bodies of children in sleeping bags, heads on pillows. He saw Harry first and went over. The boy was sleeping, predictably, between Hermione and Ron, his glasses on the floor next to him. He looked pale in the enchanted lights of the ceiling, but otherwise well. Remus looked up when a soft lumos came from a bit down the hall to Harry's right. It was Hope, sitting up in her sleeping bag, knees curled to her chest, looking at him. He carefully picked his way over to her and fell to his knees beside her as she ended the charm, and the great hall went into mostly darkness around her. Unworried about her pride, Remus gathered her in his arms, and he was unsurprised when she wrapped her arms around him and buried her face in his neck. He was surprised when he felt wetness there.
Oh, love.
He breathed.
I know it was frightening, I know.
He instinctively rocked her gently, as he had when she was small. She shook her head, and his heart stuttered.
It was, Dad, but that's not.
She stopped.
What if he's after me?
Remus's throat closed up. It took him a moment to respond as she clung to him.
He's not.
He answered softly.
You don't know.
She said.
I do. He doesn't know about you.
Hope shook her head into his neck.
He might. He could be getting information from anywhere, and...
She stopped again. Remus took a breath, held on a little harder.
And what?
Some of the students. Lots of the students. They know. They...
Remus tensed, but tried not to show it.
They what?
He felt Hope shrug against him.
Kid stuff, mostly. They say stuff. Like how crazy he is. How awful he is.
Remus felt fresh tears.
How I must be just like him.
Remus took a deep breath, willing himself to at least speak calmly, and frankly, not to hunt down and murder school-aged children in the middle of the night.
They bully you.
Hope shook her head.
Hope?
Remus started.
It's mostly stupid. I don't pay much attention usually. But things like tonight.
You're afraid it's going to get worse.
She nodded. Remus sighed.
It probably will.
She nodded again.
My friends are good about helping. And, Harry and his friends.
Good.
They know a few jinxes.
Remus tried not to laugh.
They do or you do?
Both.
Hope ventured.
As a professor, I am going to pretend I didn't hear that. But as your dad, you do what you have to do to defend yourself.
Hope nodded against his neck. Remus was silent for a moment.
I wish I could do more to protect you here.
Hope shook her head.
No, I knew coming all the way back into the wizarding world would make you a target.
Daddy, please don't. I love it.
Remus was disarmed by the use of Daddy, which he hadn't heard regularly now since Hope was about 7.
I love it here. I love the classes, the magic is brilliant, and my friends, and even potions.
Then you are much better at potions than I was.
I must be. Professor Snape says so all the time.
Remus laughed a little, hugged her a little tighter. He thought for a moment.
Then you're not like me in that way, but you like to read, and you love your friends, and a little bit of mischief.
He paused.
And you are like him, Hope. I'm not going to lie to you about that.
He felt her stiffen and tried to hug it away.
You are gifted, and brilliant, and bright, shining. You're full of motion and energy, and I would not ask or want you to be anything different.
There was silence for a moment, before Hope lifted her head to put it on his shoulder.
You never talk badly about him.
She said. It wasn't what Remus had been expecting. He reflected just a moment on why that might be, the many reasons that might be, some that had to do with not instilling anything negative in Hope, and some that did not, and decided none of it was for her hearing.
Why should I?
Remus said instead.
He gave me you.
Sitting in the whipping wind and rain, Remus reflected that there had to be conditions in which it was too dangerous to play Quidditch, and today must include some of them. Nonetheless, here he was in the staff section, wrapped in a Gryffindor scarf for the Gryffindor Hufflepuff game. He was soaked even in his coat and holding a burgundy and yellow sign that said, "Go Lions." He could see Hope as a small speck in the student section of the Gryffindor stands, holding a matching sign per her request. He grinned and waved as she waved back. Play had commenced, and Remus did his best to keep his eyes on Harry, who he knew was looking for the snitch. Harry had been around the pitch a few times by now, and lightning crashed not far from where he had just been. Remus winced. Harry, however, was moving upwards, and with intent. The announcers must have caught Harry's movement too, because he heard them commentating on whether or not he had spotted the snitch. As Harry climbed higher, Remus thought he had to have, or there would be no need in this weather for Harry to be flying that high. Then two things happened nearly simultaneously. One, Remus felt the air shift. Even as rainy, windy, and cold as it had been, the air became deeply, ominously chilly. Remus took a breath and saw it crystallize in the air around him as he blew it out, and he heard, in Sirius's voice, "What orders could you possibly have?" Then there was another flash of lightning, and, plain as day, Remus saw a large, black dog in the very top of the Gryffindor student stands. He stood quickly and turned, looking for Dumbledore or McGonagall. He saw Dumbledore first and shouted over the wind.
He's here.
Dumbledore didn't hesitate.
Where?
Flitwick stood, startled as well. Remus shouted.
The student stands, high up.
He paused.
Do you feel that?
Dumbledore nodded again.
Dementors.
Remus didn't hear the actual word over the wind and the pounding in his ears, just the shape of it on Dumbledore's lips. Remus didn't stop for anything else, started to jostle his way off the bleachers. He heard Dumbledore behind him, ordering staff to clear the stands and for play to stop. Remus was taking the stairs down to the pitch more than two at a time when the lightning flashed again, and he saw the dog was no longer in place in the stands. His heart pounded, and he swore thinking it was gone until the lightning flashed again, and Remus saw with apprehension that the dog, clearly Sirius, was running down the stands toward him. Instinctually, Remus glanced toward the stands and saw Hope, who had spotted him and was also now trying to exit the stands.
No.
He shouted at her, but she shook her head, either not hearing him or ignoring him, continuing to move her way through the crowd. Remus hit the pitch at a full run, throwing out his wand arm as he did.
Expecto Patronum.
He shouted, and the wolf jumped from his wand, large and impossibly bright, tearing toward the sidelines of the pitch and chasing Dementors away from the stands. The scene was nearly pure chaos as the staff started to herd students away from the sides of the pitch where Dementors had gathered and up toward the castle. It was slow going, the students having little idea what was happening. The players began to land as Madame Hooch had ordered, and they got caught up in the crowds as well. Harry looked disheveled and confused as Poppy Pomfrey reached him, trying to get him to follow to the castle. He looked frantically at Remus as Remus cast another Patronus, this time joined in the effort by Dumbledore and McGonagall, a phoenix and a cat charging the Dementors. Impossibly, the dog had also reached the pitch, and even in the frenzy seemed intent to reach Remus. Remus opted for the path of least resistance and ran forward as well. If it was going to come to this, then it would have to come to this, he thought. until he heard another voice, a familiar one, yell
Dad!
over the throng of students. Remus turned instinctively, slipping a little in the mud as he pivoted, as he saw with quickly descending horror that Hope was running toward him, and not away, where Flitwick was handling the Gryffindor stands. Most students evacuated into lines ready to head toward the castle.
Fuck.
Remus swore quietly. He didn't want to shout to draw attention, but he didn't have much of a choice.
No.
He shouted.
It's not safe. Go back to the castle.
Draw attention it did, because in another flash Remus saw the dog turn its head toward where Remus was shouting.
Fuck, fuck, fuck,
he said, eyeing the dog who was meters away now, torn between covering it and getting Hope off the pitch. To make matters worse, Remus saw a shock of hair in his peripheral vision that could only mean Harry was also close. Fuck, he said again, because of all the qualities he would have wanted Harry and Hope to inherit, running headlong into danger was not one of them. But they did, because Remus's focus was narrowing down to the understanding that Sirius Black was in front of him, Hope was still sliding across the mud from his right, and Harry was going against the grain of the crowd on his left. Then he saw the dog, who had already turned in Hope's direction as it followed Remus's voice, lift its head and sniff the air.
Fuck.
Remus said, wand already out, as the dog did what Remus was certain he would do next, transform. And transform he did, and Sirius Black stood just meters away from him on the Hogwarts Quidditch pitch, shaking. From somewhere around him, he heard gasping, but he couldn't place who or where it was coming from. He kept his eyes on Sirius, who was soaked to the bone in prison clothing, long, scraggly hair plastered to his head, his cheekbones, his chin. Sirius's eyes were sunken, but they bore into Remus anyway.
Moony,
he said. Remus shook, and not from the cold, not from the adrenaline.
You don't belong here,
he said flatly.
he's here.
Sirius said.
Harry, yes.
Remus snapped. He spared a glance to the side and saw Harry in a knot with Hermione and Ron alongside McGonagall. He breathed out a tiny bit easier.
Not Harry.
Sirius drew a deep, ragged breath.
Peter.
Peter is dead,
Remus said again. He risked another glance and saw Dumbledore coming between them, between Hope and Sirius.
Not as much as he'd want everyone to believe. I saw him. I saw him in the paper. I have to keep him from Harry.
You've gone mad,
Remus said bluntly.
I might have, because I smell something I shouldn't.
Remus tensed. The wind whipped through his hair.
It's a new smell. It's you, but me too. An entirely its own smell, like paperback books and piano strings. I don't know what it is, but it's important.
Sirius frowned. Remus willed Hope to be silent.
Peter is here too, though.
Sirius picked up his hand, and Remus's wand shot sparks in anticipation.
In his pocket.
He pointed at Ron.
What?
Remus said. His goal was to keep Sirius engaged while McGonagall and Dumbledore cleared the children.
Harry's friend has a little pet,
Sirius said. Remus heard Ron yelp.
Ouch.
He said.
Scabbers, stop.
McGonagall took the opportunity to pull Harry and Ron back toward Hermione, who had been creeping backwards.
No.
Sirius yelled.
He stays.
At that, Ron, who had been gripping his robe pocket, yelped again and grabbed hold of something that he brought out, a garden-variety rat. The rat struggled in his hands. Remus drew a sharp breath, and he heard Dumbledore a second later.
Didn't you say Peter Pettigrew's animagus form was a rat?
The tone was deceptively mild. Remus looked back at Sirius.
I did.
Before Remus could say more, Dumbledore fired off a precise stupefy, and the rat stilled in Ron's hands. Ron, clearly acting on instinct, dropped it. McGonagall quickly scooped it up. Sirius breathed out, and for the first time that day, Remus saw the young man he had been.
Professor Lupin,
Dumbledore asked.
the situation is precarious.
Remus kept his eyes and wand on Sirius.
Yes, Professor.
Your suggestions?
Clear the remaining students. Bind Sirius. Investigate him and the rats.
Remus watched as Dumbledore and McGonagall exchanged a look.
Professor Lupin, I ask you gently to switch with me. Let me take custody of Mr. Black. You may have custody of this student.
Remus let himself look over properly for the first time. Hope was standing with Dumbledore, her face pale, strands pulled from her ponytail whipping around her face. She was all big brown eyes, moving them between Remus and Sirius. She looked a little afraid, and a lot shaken. Remus's stomach dropped.
Of course.
Dumbledore raised his wand towards Sirius as Remus lowered his, letting his feet take him the distance to his daughter. She collapsed against him immediately, and he brought his arms around her tightly as she buried her face in his chest. He rested his chin on her head and held back his own tears.
Daddy.
She said, tears in her voice.
I know,
He said, achingly softly. He knew Sirius's eyes were on them the entire time, but he could not bring himself to care. It's not like life was fair. It wasn't even close to midnight, but it felt like it. Remus was waiting for Dumbledore in his office, had been waiting for hours. McGonagall had taken Hope to his quarters and was personally overseeing her care and comfort. Not for the first time, Remus was grateful for the kindness of women in his life. Dumbledore had summoned the Ministry, and he, Fudge, and a handful of Aurors had disappeared long ago, presumably to question Sirius in what looked to Remus like Peter's animagus form. He sighed again before he heard the door behind him open and shut quietly. Dumbledore came around the edge of his desk and sat down. His face looked weary. Remus could relate.
It's been a long day. I will get straight to the point.
Dumbledore started. His gaze was level, but it was serious, and Remus noted, it seemed a little disappointed, though Remus could not place why or with whom.
Ron Weasley's pet rat is indeed Peter Pettigrew,
Dumbledore said. Remus closed his eyes, ran his hand over his face.
While there are flaws in the methods, both Pettigrew and Black were administered Veritaserum, and memories were given and taken and viewed inoffensive.
Remus blinked.
Their combined evidence, fortunately probably, corroborates Black's story.
Remus took a breath.
They switched, as secret keeper.
He had been in the office for hours, thinking, and it was the only thing that made sense. Dumbledore nodded, and Remus heard a roaring sound in his ears.
It was Black's idea. He thought he was the obvious choice, and this would be an attempt at a bluff. We knew there was a spy in the Order, but no one suspected Pettigrew.
Because he suspected me,
Remus added. It hurt much, much less than it had over the last 12 years, though there was now an edge to it. Dumbledore sighed.
Yet it was Pettigrew. He was a Death Eater. In fact, he's still pledging allegiance to the Dark Lord under Veritaserum.
Remus's mouth twisted.
And he spent all this time so near to Harry.
Dumbledore nodded, making it a grim gesture.
Pettigrew told Voldemort of the Potter's location within a week of the Fidelius. Black had a bad feeling, went to check on Pettigrew, found his home empty. He then went to the Potter's house where...
Dumbledore stopped.
Well, you know what he found. Hagrid was there, sent by me to claim Harry. Sirius left Harry in Hagrid's care, expecting to be back. After that, he went to find Pettigrew.
He did find him,
Remus said.
Yes, Pettigrew cut off a finger and blasted his way out of the situation. He transformed into his animagus form and escaped. By the time the Aurors arrived on the scene, Black was alone, and a dozen Muggles were dead, and Black
was still there.
Remus sighed, a heavy sound.
You've seen the pictures,
Dumbledore said. Remus nodded. He ventured a theory.
He felt guilty. He thought it was his fault.
Dumbledore inclined his head in answer.
And they threw him in Azkaban, without a trial, without so much as testing his wand, or receiving testimony.
Remus put his head in his hands. It was silent for a few moments.
So now,
the Ministry is going to take Black's wand from Azkaban, perform some tests, including priori incantatem. If they come back in the morning and don't have a pardon for Mr. Black, they will be feeling the full power I can inflict at the Wizengamot,
Dumbledore said. Remus looked up. He tried very hard not to tell Dumbledore that sounded like too little too late.
And Peter?
He is bound and spelled in the North Tower. He can no longer transform. If they come tomorrow and don't put him in Azkaban awaiting trial, then the same sentiments will apply. Arthur Weasley won a Ministry contest this summer. The family took a trip, and their photo was in the Prophet, along with Pettigrew on Ron's shoulder. Black saw the photo, recognized the danger to Harry. That's why he escaped.
Remus sighed.
Harry needs to be told. Sirius is his godfather.
Sirius's name felt foreign in his mouth. Dumbledore nodded.
I will send for him in a moment. I believe you have places to be as well, likely more than one.
Remus looked at him shrewdly, then sighed. He wanted to be nowhere else than with Hope, but there was someone else who needed to come first, who would probably have answers Remus needed to give her.
I have insisted that Mr. Black be installed in the hospital wing. He is deeply malnourished and has other minor injuries. Poppy Pomfrey has been tending to him, cleaning him up and performing some much-needed medical care. As far as I am concerned, he is a guest here, not a prisoner.
Remus blinked.
Am I being dismissed?
Dumbledore smiled, but it was a thin, tired thing.
Go where you need to go, Remus. Everyone will still be here in the morning, including me.
Remus nodded and stood. Remus was greeted by Poppy Pomfrey at the entrance to the infirmary. Her eyes filling with tears, she embraced him tightly. He returned the embrace with feeling. It had always been Poppy Pomfrey who had looked after him, and she was doing so now, still, always.
He's still awake,
Poppy said softly.
but no longer so agitated.
She paused.
I've set up a comfortable chair from my office for visitors.
She smiled gently.
I suppose I'm a visitor.
Remus said. Poppy squeezed his hands, and he took as much courage from them as he could.
Go, I think he's staying awake for you.
She said. She let go of his hands. Remus quietly made his way over to a corner of the infirmary, near a window, where a white curtain was sectioning off what must be a bed and at least one chair. Remus took a long, steadying breath and opened the curtain enough to let himself inside. He closed it behind him. There, in the bed, was Sirius Black. He was wearing pajama bottoms and a soft, worn t-shirt that someone must have dug up from somewhere. He had clearly had a bath, and Remus could tell, even with his mouth still closed, that Pomfrey had also performed some dental work. As Sirius's jaw was set in the same line Remus remembered from more than 12 years ago. She had also cut his hair, which now brushed his shoulders instead of flowing down his back. A glass of water, half empty, was sitting on the table next to him, along with the remains of a sandwich. Sirius looked up when Remus entered and then took a seat in the chair. Sirius didn't take his gray eyes off Remus, but neither did he speak. Remus didn't know he was going to say it before he did.
Padfoot,
he breathed. Sirius's eyes searched his face, and he took a breath.
Professor.
Remus heard the question, and if this had been years ago, he would have thought of it as teasing.
Just since this September, this year.
Sirius nodded. He looked down at the blanket, back up at Remus. Remus could see Sirius's throat constrict, and he decided to put Sirius out of his misery. It was long past time he did that.
Dumbledore told me the story.
Remus began.
You believe him?
Sirius sounded small, breathless. Remus's heart flopped over in his chest.
Of course I believe him,
Remus said. Sirius sighed, clearly relieved.
I should have believed 12 years ago,
Remus added. At that, Sirius looked up.
Moony,
he said. Remus thought, there it goes. There goes another piece of my heart, broken off.
I'm so sorry I believed you were the spy.
Sirius said, voice thick. Remus shook his head.
And are you? I will forgive you if you forgive me.
Sirius didn't even hesitate.
I do. Of course I do.
Then I'll consider the forgiveness gifted freely and taken with truth, on both sides.
Remus said, watching Sirius's shoulders relax, round off. Remus watched Sirius fiddle with the blanket for a moment.
You want to ask me? I know you do,
he said gently.
So ask.
Sirius shook his head.
I'm not sure how.
His voice sounded small, quiet.
Sirius.
Sirius looked up.
Paperback books and piano strings,
Remus asked. Sirius nodded.
She reads a lot, and she's gifted with music, has taken piano lessons since she was 4. She takes them from Flitwick now that she's at Hogwarts.
Moony.
She's mine. She's my daughter, Padfoot, and yours. Oh, always yours, so very clearly, so very much.
Sirius took a breath, though his eyes didn't leave Remus's.
It's more common in the magical world than is talked about,
Remus said, which sounded so clinical he nearly laughed. Sirius took a breath.
Toujours pur,
he said.
Pardon?
Remus's eyebrows came together in surprise.
You'd believe the measures pure blood families go to remain pure blood. Easy enough to make up a female name to put on the tapestry, as long as the blood remains pure.
Oh,
Remus said.
Well, someone could have told me,
he said with a trace of sarcasm. Sirius's eyes filled with tears, and Remus was suddenly sure that wasn't the right thing to say.
Also more common among magical creatures, which, as much as we deny it, I also am,
he said.
Oh, Moony.
He reached for Remus's hand from the bed, stopped himself. Remus took his hand anyway.
When did you know? While I
Sirius swallowed. Remus shook his head, answered honestly, though he didn't know what exactly Sirius was asking.
No, I didn't realize until you were in Azkaban. She's 11, a first year.
Sirius tried to drop his hand from Remus's, and Remus wouldn't let him. Held on. He should have always held on.
Moony, I'm so sorry.
Sirius said softly.
I'm not.
Remus said, and Sirius looked at him sharply, he thought, amended his statement.
I'm sorry you weren't there. I'm sorry you didn't know. I'm sorry you were in a dark cell with no light. I'm sorry I was alone.
Remus stopped, swallowed. Sirius's eyes filled with tears.
But I am not for one moment sorry about her life. She is extraordinary, and if you ever needed a legacy, she is the very best one. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me, including you, even when it was hard, and it was oh so hard. But I would give her up for nothing and for no one.
I should never have chased Peter. I should never have gone to Azkaban. I should have put up more of a fight for you and for Harry.
Sirius.
Remus's voice was firm.
We can't change the past.
Are you about to tell me life is unfair?
Sirius asked. The question startled a laugh out of Remus.
Without saying as much, probably.
She called you Daddy.
Sirius said.
She doesn't often anymore. Gave it up several years ago, except when she's sick or scared.
Sirius looked down.
These days, I'm mostly Dad. In a couple of years, I expect to be. Hey, you.
Sirius looked up again, a ghost of a smile on his lips.
The day she calls me Remus is the day I pitch a royal bloody fit.
And what do you call her?
Sirius asked.
Hope.
Remus said, and it felt like a prayer.
Your mother's name?
And a sentiment I desperately needed.
Remus said, squeezing Sirius's hand. Remus relieved Minerva, but Hope had been asleep for a few hours already. He looked in on her, in her room in his quarters. He brushed her hair from her sleeping face and a soft kiss to her forehead. He went to his own room, not expecting to sleep. Instead, his head fell like a stone onto the pillow, and he was asleep instantly, perhaps for the first time in years. They stood outside the hospital wing, and it was Remus who was hesitating. It was still early, and the ministry had not arrived yet. He was afraid that they would be interrupted, but he had woken to Hope hovering over his face, then crawling into his bed as she hadn't done since she was tiny. Her face had been full of determination, and she had only said one thing.
I want to see him.
She hadn't heard the story yet, not the full story, but there she was, demanding the truth, and Remus was not about to deny her. Now he asked her,
Are you sure?
She shot Remus such a withering look, it suddenly made him deeply afraid for her teenage years. He sighed and gestured with his arm.
After you, love,
he said. Again, Poppy Pomfrey met them at the entrance. She smiled at both of them, though Remus noticed the slight raise of her eyebrows. He shrugged just slightly, and she gave him a small wink.
He's awake. Just finished breakfast. Shall I tell him he has visitors?
No need,
Remus said.
I know where he is.
Poppy nodded.
I'll bring over another chair.
Remus nodded to her, and then led the way to the closed white curtain. He could see the early morning sun shining through the fabric from the window. Remus parted the curtain just enough to stick his head in. Sirius looked over from where he had been looking out the window. He didn't smile, but his face softened.
I brought you another visitor,
Remus said, and pulled the curtain wider to reveal Hope, who didn't hesitate before she walked in, right up to Sirius, and sat on the bed near his knees. Remus watched Sirius blink once, twice, 3 times.
Why did you let them take you to Azkaban even though you were innocent?
Hope's question was without any kind of guile. Sirius blinked again. Now there's the resemblance, Remus thought, not her hair or her face. Sirius tilted his head, considering.
Because I felt responsible anyway,
he said honestly.
You needed to have been responsible to him.
Hope said, pointing at Remus, who shot her a look and sat down in the chair he had been in just the night before.
Hope,
Remus said sternly. A set of heads with black hair turned to him at the same time. It was a bit unnerving. After a beat, Sirius said,
Moony, it's all right.
He turned to Hope, who had turned back to face him again.
You're right, I should have been. The war made me stressed and paranoid and unforgiving, sometimes cruel. It wasn't right, and it destroyed everything I loved.
Sirius's voice caught on the word loved. Hope did not look mollified in the slightest. She opened her mouth.
Hope?
Remus said gentler this time.
You can't litigate the past.
He said. Hope looked at him, stubborn. He knew that look on two faces, and again, it was unnerving to finally see them together.
Believe me,
He said even more softly.
I have tried.
Hope settled down a bit, scooting further onto the bed. Sirius moved his legs, today dressed in some muggle jeans and a t-shirt, to accommodate her. The two, father and daughter, contemplated each other for a long moment.
I look just like you.
Hope said finally. Remus laughed softly, as this was no revelation to him.
You have Remus's eyes, though.
Sirius said. Hope shrugged in acknowledgement. Remus just kept from rolling his eyes himself.
Professor McGonagall said she's only ever seen one other student as talented in transfiguration as I am.
Hope declared. Remus, who knew that student had to have been Sirius himself, cocked his head to the side.
Did she now?
Sirius asked. He threw a small glance at Remus.
Humble too.
Remus muttered, not surprised that they ignored him.
I'm hoping she'll teach me to be an animagus.
Hope continued.
She's one, and you.
Not until you're of age.
Remus said. Hope turned to look at him. He raised his eyebrows.
Of age, or at least not 11.
He said.
I could do it.
Hope argued. Remus didn't doubt she could, actually. He saw the corner of Sirius's mouth twitch up. Hope turned back to consider him.
The Sorting Hat considered putting me in Slytherin.
She said. Remus raised his eyebrows. He knew it had talked to her, but she had never disclosed to him what had been said.
It said all the blacks, but one had been Slytherins and fine ones at that.
Remus glanced at Sirius, who was watching Hope intently.
It said I had the intelligence and ambition to do well there, but that I also had a streak for justice, and that my whole life had been built on small acts of bravery, whether I knew it or not, and that I would probably accomplish more in Gryffindor.
Remus swallowed against the lump in his throat. He watched as Sirius didn't take his eyes off Hope's face.
And what did you say?
Sirius asked. Remus, who had heard what Hope had said, knew what was coming.
Obviously.
She said.
Obviously.
Sirius repeated, looking over Hope's head at Remus finally.
Small acts of bravery. I'm not sure they were small at all.
Hope looked back at Remus for a moment, then twisted around to Sirius again.
Well, then you'd better find your courage too then, Sirius Black,
she said. Remus drew in a breath at her words. He almost scolded her, but the look on Sirius's face stopped him.
I suppose you're right, Hope Lupin,
he said.
Can I start now?
Hope looked a little wary, but she nodded.
Would you mind very much if I gave you a hug?
In answer, Hope fell forward until Sirius caught her in his arms. As their matching black heads fit together, Remus tried to wipe at his eyes without them seeing. The ministry did come that morning, as Hope was regaling Sirius with the tales of a first year at Hogwarts. Sirius listened with rapt attention until the curtain drew back, and Dumbledore, Fudge, and Alastor Moody showed their figures. Remus watched Sirius tense, and saw it reflect in Hope. He would have none of that, so he ushered them out quickly, with one last look at Sirius's face. Now, as Dumbledore stood in his quarters with Sirius, Remus reflected that the world had tilted on its axis the moment he had spotted Padfoot in the stands. The ministry had issued a pardon, but where Sirius would go remained another matter. When Remus felt a shimmer of magic, he realized Dumbledore had added another bedroom to his quarters through magic, and he sighed. He had dispatched Hope not just to her room, but to Gryffindor Tower, trying to keep her as far away from this conversation as possible. She had gone with much fussing, but she had gone.
I realize you have 12 Grimmauld Place.
Dumbledore started.
No.
Remus said at the moment Sirius paled at the name.
Then I propose, at least temporarily, that you lie low at Professor Lupin's.
Dumbledore said mildly. He eyed Remus over his spectacles. Remus strongly suspected him of meddling.
There's my cottage.
Remus began.
I don't want to be alone.
Sirius said, and Remus had softened. Remus nodded.
Here then,
he said.
Mr. Black, I understand you don't wish to be confined, but I ask that you keep to yourself as much as possible. The students and staff will be curious. Professor Lupin will have classes.
Dumbledore said. Sirius nodded.
I can take care of myself.
I can have the house elves deliver meals if you find the Great Hall overwhelming.
Sirius hesitated long enough that Remus knew that he did.
Yes, thank you.
Sirius said.
I'll also have them fetch you some more clothes, some belongings.
I can do that.
Remus interjected. Sirius looked at him.
It'll only mean a trip or two to Hogsmeade.
He said softly. Dumbledore nodded.
I'll get a key to the Black Vault,
he said. Remus wondered how on earth Dumbledore would manage that, but he nodded. Sirius sighed.
I can find my own place soon enough,
he said. Remus tilted his head and wondered, but he let the comment pass. So did Dumbledore. Once again, Remus found that they settled into a routine quickly. He and Sirius took breakfast in his quarters. Hope still had lunch with him on Tuesdays and Fridays, sometimes in his office, sometimes in his quarters. Sirius often joined them, but not always. He seemed to sense it was their time together, and let it be. Instead, he and Hope often wandered the castle in the evenings, strolling together among the tapestries or on the grounds. Remus didn't intrude, and he didn't hear any chatter, either from the staff or the students. He suspected it was just done quietly, behind his back, but that was fine with him, as long as it didn't affect Hope or Sirius, and it seemed not to. Harry sometimes joined them, and Remus knew he had lunch with Sirius in their quarters on Wednesdays. Harry sometimes came over on the weekends for tea or a game of chess. Hope sometimes with him, sometimes caught up in her own friends. Hope was significantly better at chess than Harry, and Harry had confessed she often preferred to play with Ron, who was also significantly better than Harry. Harry ruefully noted that Hermione coached Hope from the sidelines sometimes, and Remus hid his smile behind the papers he was marking. What he and Sirius never did was talk about anything prior to the fall. Remus had heard Sirius talk to Harry about James and Lily, often quietly, but they never talked to each other, or about each other. They never talked about their time at Hogwarts, or what had led them together, or how they had fallen apart. They never talked about the circumstances of Hope's conception or birth. Remus shared stories from her childhood, and knew Hope did too. But they never talked about them, and the itch underneath Remus's skin became more and more pronounced by the day. It was nearly Christmas holidays, and the children, and therefore the staff, were restless. Remus had a half day that day, his morning periods meant for prep. The castle was full of lights and trees and shining stars. Flitwick had gone out of his way that year. Remus sighed. He had wondered if he should take Hope and Sirius to the cottage in Wales for the holiday, but as Harry would be staying over, he decided they should as well. He had wrangled a small tree and put it up near the fireplace in his quarters. Remus had left it bare to decorate later, and was surprised when he came home and it was lit up. Real pixies inside, charmed to docility and flickering slowly, calmly. Hope had been delighted, and Sirius had grinned, and that had been enough for Remus. His quarters had a small kitchen, though it was stocked by the house elves, and Remus was at the stove now, putting on the kettle as Sirius entered, hair bedraggled from sleep, blinking. Remus had put toast on as well and taken out the butter and jam. Sirius poured a mug of tea, drank it black, and then refilled it, taking a seat at the table. He watched Remus prepare his toast at the counter.
You don't keep marmalade around anymore,
Sirius noted, sipping from his mug. Remus stilled. He took a breath.
Remus,
Sirius said, suddenly uncertain. It probably seemed like an innocent comment. Remus kept buttering his toast. It was an effort. This shouldn't be so hard, he thought. He tried to keep his voice light.
When I was pregnant with Hope, it made me sick. It smelled far too sweet. I stopped buying it then. I never got back into the habit. Honestly, it still makes me vaguely nauseated.
Oh,
Sirius said. When Remus turned from the counter, he was looking down at the table. He looked up again when Remus sat down.
You don't talk much about that,
he said. Remus sighed.
No, I suppose I don't.
He conceded. Remus heard Sirius pull a breath.
You could,
Sirius said. Remus left his toast on his plate.
I'm not so sure.
Sirius hummed a non-committal sound.
I'm not so sure I could say.
Remus admitted.
That your lover left you magically pregnant and alone by getting himself thrown in prison for the murder of your best friends,
Sirius offered. Remus looked up. Sirius's tone had been neutral. The look in his eyes was not.
It wasn't like that.
Sirius raised an eyebrow. That lit a fire. Remus hadn't known he had been carrying the kindling for.
For one thing, it was not about you.
He started. Sirius flinched, and he put down his mug, but he didn't look away.
My life seemed over. Just one big, gaping hole of nothingness. stretching on, unwinding into a future where I struggled to breathe and held various odd jobs and kept myself together with will and spit until I hit January, and it occurred to me there was a reason Marmalade had me bending over the toilet in the morning, or that my trousers were no longer fitting, or that I could smell the curry takeaway place from 5 blocks away. How I sat in the library in Oxford and read with trembling hands about magical and dark creatures and procreation, which, by the way, does not come with the Hogwarts sexual education packet. And then the only thing I had was my parents' cottage and a meagre inheritance and just enough strength to find things secondhand, to paint, to get books and toys and watch my belly swell with the life inside it. She was a kicker, a hard one, always on the move, from the very beginning, and I would spend whole days in my bed, my hands on my belly, feeling her move, feeling that that was the only reason I should still be alive. I'd prod her with my hand, and she would move back, and I suddenly felt like I shared a language with someone I had never met. I didn't even know she was a she, not then, until the summer, a hot day in July, when I woke up to tightening and pain, and the movement had stopped. I waited as long as I could, and I drove myself to the hospital. And because there was no one, the nurse stayed and held my hand, even though there were other patients and it hurt, Sirius, in my body and my soul, until I thought I would be stretched apart, be broken open. And she did. She came into the world, and she broke me open. And I haven't been able to knit back together in 11 years because being with her is the most wonderful, beautiful thing. It is the most miraculous thing that has ever happened to me. And when I thought there was a chance you would hurt her, I would have killed you dead. I would have killed you on that pitch rather than rescue you, innocent or not, if you had come near her. It's the luckiest thing in the world you didn't, because Merlin knows she ran right toward you, even when she thought you were guilty, because of course she did. Of course she did.
Remus stopped, his hands were shaking. Sirius regarded him for a long moment before picking up one of Remus's shaking hands from the kitchen table.
Of course she did. She's you all over.
Remus laughed wetly.
Oh dear Godric, she is you all over, and you would have to be blind not to see that.
Sirius entwined their fingers.
Point taken.
And I love her. And I couldn't love her without also loving you too. Not every day, every moment, for the last 12 years.
Remus said slowly. Remus breathed, but Sirius kept their hands entwined.
The Dementors, they take every happy memory. Many of my memories of you, especially that last year, they were too bittersweet to take. So the Dementors fed off of them instead. But the rest I tried to tuck away, to hide. I don't know how successful I was, but I remember. I do remember.
Remus looked down. He couldn't bring himself to ask what Sirius remembered.
Moony.
Remus looked up again.
Someone recently told me I needed to find my courage again.
Remus smiled. Sirius half stood up, leaned across the kitchen table, and kissed him. It was chaste at first, and Remus thought he was prepared. As with most things in his life, Remus realized he was caught out again by surprise. Sirius's lips were dry and utterly full and completely impossible, and Remus chased them, the feeling, across the table. Sirius pulled back and kissed again, this time mouth open, and Remus let him, opened his mouth, felt the scrape of morning stubble and the taste of mint toothpaste and tea. When they pulled apart, they were both breathing hard.
We could wait,
Remus said, though the relief of the itch under his skin fading was comforting and intoxicating.
I did my waiting,
Sirius said.
12 years of it, in Azkaban.
Remus blinked back sudden tears before moving their hands and pulling Sirius toward the doorway. He had to stop in the doorway to kiss Sirius again, and this time there was little that was gentle about it. The clashing of teeth, his hands on Sirius's face, curling around his jaw.
My bedroom, I think,
Remus said, and Sirius nodded, allowed himself to be pulled along by Remus until Remus wrapped his arms around Sirius's neck and kissed him again, mere centimeters from the bed. Sirius was close, and Remus could feel him hard against his thigh already. Remus hissed, moved his hands and pulled them to Sirius's hips, pulled them closer. This time, it was Sirius who hissed. Remus got a hand between them and pulled at Sirius's shirt, his pajama bottoms, his pants, casting it all to the floor before placing scalding kisses on Sirius's jaw, his neck, his collarbone.
Remus.
Sirius gritted out.
Mooney.
Remus stopped, looked up, saw Sirius's eyes flutter open, pupils blown wide and dark.
Do we?
Sirius breathed hard. Remus was confused until logic broke through his haze of want, and he raised an eyebrow.
Do you need to have the sex talk?
He couldn't keep the amusement out of his voice.
I mean, we did end up with an accidental kid.
Sirius said, and Remus kissed him gently. Remus pulled back.
Who is great, let's establish.
Established.
But there's a protection charm.
Remus said.
You'd be surprised what I can find when I put my mind to it.
He uttered it now, a wave of his hand with wandless magic. Sirius's eyes widened as he took in what that movement meant. Then they narrowed again, and Remus's heart stuttered a little because he knew what was coming next.
Have you had to?
Sirius started. Remus cut him off with another kiss. Sirius melted into it, and Remus knew it was safe. He pulled back and shook his head.
No, busy with the accidental kid. And too busy being in love with her father.
He added. This time it was Sirius who chased Remus's mouth, using gentle hands to divest him of his clothing before pushing him gently onto the bed. Remus let him roll them until he was pinned underneath Sirius's weight, their cocks trapped between them hard and heavy, as Sirius kissed his shoulders, down his hips, along his thigh. Remus was trembling, but he couldn't stop. Sirius stopped what he was doing and looked up, meeting Remus's eyes.
All right there, Mooney.
Remus carted a hand through Sirius's hair.
More than overwhelmed, but that's okay.
Sirius continued to pause, look up.
Don't stop,
Remus reiterated, and Sirius lowered his eyes before wrapping his hand around the base of Remus's cock and taking the rest in his mouth. Remus's back arched off the bed.
Oh,
he said, and then he was lost to the feel of Sirius's hand, to his mouth, his whole world shrunken down to that point, and to the feel of Sirius's other hand on his hip. It didn't take long, it had been a long time for him, but he writhed once, twice, before his hips lost control and stuttered as he emptied himself into Sirius's mouth. Sirius merely hummed and swallowed, and eventually pulled off with another small hum as Remus went a bit boneless on the bed. Remus blinked, letting his eyes flutter shut as Sirius kissed him again, long and messy.
All right, Mooney.
Sirius asked again, and Remus surged up to meet his mouth again, wet and filthy.
If you don't end up inside of me soon, I will be up, get dressed, and walk down to my office to finish my marking,
he said, though it was breathless. Sirius blew a laugh against his neck.
Big talker,
he said, but he pulled away enough to kneel between Remus's legs. This time, he murmured the spell, and Remus gasped at the sudden openness and wetness. Sirius drew his index finger down Remus's balls and toyed with the entrance before carefully sliding the finger inside. Remus drew a breath. He closed his eyes. He preempted Sirius's concern by pushing back on the finger. Sirius took it as the encouragement it was and added another. They both groaned at the contact. Remus muttered another spell and reached for Sirius's cock, half sitting up and rubbing his newly slick hand up and down, thumb trailing into Sirius's slit. Sirius groaned again, and the rhythm he had set with his fingers started to falter, just a bit. Remus laid back down, and Sirius pulled one of his legs up and over his hip before adding a third finger, stretching Remus and then curling his fingers just so.
Oh,
Remus said again, feeling himself impossibly beginning to grow hard again.
Mooney,
Sirius said, his voice strung out, and Remus nodded.
Please, Padfoot, Merlin, please,
he said. There was a momentary pause as Sirius took his fingers away, before they were replaced by Sirius himself. They both moaned at the contact, as Sirius sunk in slowly until his hips were flush against Remus. Sirius was still for a long moment as Remus felt himself flush and, to his surprise, grow even harder. Sirius pulled out almost completely before thrusting in again, and Remus bit off Sirius's name in his mouth.
I saw you, you know,
Sirius said, almost conversationally, though his fringe was dripping sweat onto Remus's chest.
You would walk the grounds, sometimes with Harry, sometimes with...
He paused, letting the rhythm overtake him. Remus opened his eyes and saw the long line of Sirius's neck, the look of concentration on his face, his eyes closed, the pleasure that almost looked like pain.
I didn't know, of course, but I could see. I could see the love, because I'd only ever seen a look like that on your face when you looked at me. It was different, but I know what love looks like on you.
Remus reached up, cupped Sirius's cheeks. Sirius's pace had picked up, and he had closed his eyes.
I wanted you like this since those moments, since I saw you again.
Padfoot.
Remus groaned, moving his hips a fraction to the side and sending blinding pleasure up his body as a result.
Your face, it becomes softer. Your jaw, the lines of it, they settle like they should, hard, but not sharp. Your eyes lose their lines. You forget to stoop your shoulders when you walk or sit down.
Sirius's pace was fast now, almost out of control, and Remus wrapped himself around him, his own cock trapped between them.
I wanted to see you look at me like that again,
Sirius said, and his voice broke.
Sirius, open your eyes.
Remus said. Sirius did and said,
That look, that's the one. I saw it in the infirmary against all odds. I've seen it every day since, but I waited.
Don't wait anymore.
Remus said softly.
Know it, I love you.
He said. Sirius's hips stuttered as he buried himself inside Remus and came, and Remus followed again, untouched, warm and wet between them. Sirius finally stilled, and Remus finally let go a little, enough to allow Sirius to pull out and wave his hand, cleaning up the mess. Both of them were too hot for the duvet, even in the December cold.
I love you, Mooney,
Sirius said softly, placing a kiss to Remus's collarbone, his neck. Remus turned toward him.
I know, but I needed to hear it.
He let his hand cup Sirius's cheek. Sirius nodded. Eventually, they did need the duvet, and Remus dozed until it was time for him to think about lunch and leaving for his afternoon classes. He sighed. When he stirred, Sirius did as well. This time, Sirius was still there.
I'll be back,
Remus said, leaning down for a light kiss. He quickly found his clothes, robes included, and redressed.
I know, you'll always come back.
Sirius's expression was entirely open, and Remus blinked back tears. He kissed Sirius again. He couldn't stop himself from pausing in the doorway.
I would be careful, if I were you, of calling her the accidental kid, even in private. It'll slip out when she's present, and...
Sirius groaned.
She'll kill me where I stand,
he said. Remus grinned.
Exactly, she's your daughter.
He left to the sound of Sirius's laughter behind him. They spent the year at Hogwarts, but in the summer, Remus and Hope took Sirius and Harry back to their cottage in Wales and enjoyed the fresh-cut grass and sweet summer sun. Music from the piano. Sirius had delivered drifted out the open windows, and Sirius, when he passed by the bench, would lean down and press a kiss to his girl's head, not missing the way it made Remus and Hope smile. Remus tried to let life surprise him again, this time in all the best ways. Finite. Thanks for listening to this text-to-speech podfic composed by Burning Aurora, Caliana, and Flowerhawk.